I must start this video with the disclosure that my opinions are based on a review copy I kindly received from Nightdive around 5 days before Blade Runner was released. Some of the things I mention in this video might change when the game is released or after release in an update. When it was announced that Nightdive were working on Blade Runner, I was very excited. This is high on my top 10 list of PC games. I played the game as a kid, which got me interested in the movie and the book, so there's a lot of nostalgia there for me, and I couldn't have picked a better company to restore it than Nightdive. When I was waiting for the release, I was thinking, how could Nightdive remake Blade Runner without the source code and the source 3D models? And the answer is they can't, and never intended to. This is not a remake. This is not even a remaster. The clue is in the title. This is the Enhanced Edition. When I first played the game, I didn't see much of a change, so I quickly closed the Enhanced Edition and booted up the original game to compare the graphics. It was only then that I realised how pixelated the original game was, and that Nightdive have smoothed out all of those pixels. Being an Enhanced Edition and not a remaster means that the changes are fairly subtle. One of the first enhancements I noticed was the game now has a main menu. In the original game, it would just boot you right into the game without giving you any options. So you can now choose your player personality before the game actually loads up, which is actually a nice feature because I think a lot of people probably would have missed the personalities in the original game. I know when I first played the game, I didn't even know you could switch personalities for quite a while. And I definitely didn't appreciate how much the story changes depending on your personality. For anyone wondering, the best personality to usually go with is user choice, because that way you can individually choose which question you want to ask the suspects. The next and probably biggest change is the Kaya system has been completely overhauled. We now have a really nice HD decal for the Kaya system and all HD text, and because the load and save function is in the main menu and player personality, the Kaya system has been streamlined to just one page, replacing the little button you would normally press to take you to the second page with just like a yellowish light. I'll quickly put some footage of the old Kaya system on screen now and show that you had to flick through 2 different pages, which was essentially the old game's way of giving you a menu. The new one's much more streamlined and it's widescreen. I don't know why this was the only sort of overlay to get HD textures along with the menu, but the Void Comp machine I thought would have been pretty good to do in HD as well. I'm assuming because it was like a lot of it's like video footage and stuff, maybe they couldn't have upscaled, because it's not a static thing that had like the eyeball moving and stuff, and maybe they wouldn't have been able to upscale all the buttons and things like that. They wouldn't have been able to create their own version. Probably more like because it's an enhanced edition and not a full-on remaster or remake, there was limitations to how far they could actually push the upgrades. Another minor change is the text in the spinner menu. Whenever you're choosing the next location to visit, this little text box pops up on top of it, and it pops up a lot quicker in the enhanced edition, and it's in HD. Whereas in the older version, it took a little bit longer for it to actually pop up, and it just the text wasn't quite as high resolution. But this menu would have been another prime candidate to be made into HD, just like the Kaya one. I'm not sure the reason behind this. Again, it could have just been a budget thing. Maybe they didn't have as much time to actually work on these things. Maybe it was just AI upscaled instead of just a full-on remake. And again, maybe they just didn't like to get into the remake territory, because where do you stop really if you're just doing an enhanced edition? In terms of the upressing of the original video files, I think it definitely works better in some places rather than others. Where I thought it looked really well was places like the arcade, where not so much the upressing of the pixels, but the actual movement of the likes of the moon bus when it's spinning around and the footage of the various games in the arcade, they definitely look a lot better in the enhanced edition compared to the original edition. Also, there's a few areas I can see where the pixelation's been cleaned up quite nicely. The first time I actually noticed this was when Ray's spinner lands on his apartment roof. It just really caught my eye how the 60 frames per second looks a lot nicer. Another part I really liked was the neon signs in Anemoid Row. I'm not sure what it was about these signs, but they just looked a lot sharper and kind of cleaner in the Enhanced Edition. There were a few times like this where the Enhanced Edition showed me the game in a new light. You know, by clearing up most of the pixelation, I can imagine what this game would look like if it wasn't so heavily compressed. It kind of tricks your mind into thinking that you're looking at something slightly more high res than it is. Some of the background characters as well kind of caught my eye when I was playing it. Like, they just, I think the reduction of the pixels kind of brings them a little bit more to life. Like, for example, this scene in the comedy club where you just see kind of people moving about. I don't know what it is, it just like tricks you into thinking you're looking at like really high res stuff, especially if you're not paying too much attention to the detail. What's cool is that these are actually all high quality 3D models in the original game, but they were just compressed hundreds of times to make them usable with the limited hardware of the time. This is what makes a remake of Blade Runner so appealing. We no longer have those limitations with hardware, so what would those high-res models look like if they weren't compressed? And in some ways we may never know because we don't have the original source 3D files. So instead, Nightdive have been forced to just try and upscale the original footage. So is that good or bad? Does that actually work? The answer is highly subjective here, and I think it definitely works in some parts of the games. There is now a sort of impressionistic style to some of it. Instead of that pixelated style, it's more of an impressionistic, blurry style, I think. And in some ways this is the AI's impression of what the game would look like at a higher resolution. At least it's the AI's best approximation of what the game would look like. And things look slightly blurry as a result. Those hard, jaggy pixels have now been smoothed out, and for me the blur adds like a level of ambiguity to the background that I think is actually kind of nice. But the problem with this blurriness means that there are certainly some parts of the game that don't look so nice. One of the worst examples I could find of this was in a warehouse in the game. The texture on the bricks is almost completely gone because it's kind of blurry. So you lose all of the brick texture definition, and also the ground details are all fairly missing in the Enhanced Edition because the upscaling has actually blurred those highlights in the ground, so you no longer have the bumpiness of the ground. Also, the pipe in the middle of the floor just looks very smooth to the point where you kind of lose the refined edges of the actual end of the pipe. Also, the graffiti is a little bit harder to read and harder to sort of see because again, it's just kind of lost that little bit of definition with the smoothing out of the pixels. So that was probably one of the worst examples I've seen, but there are a couple of other things that stood out to me, but I can't tell if they're little graphical bugs or it's because I'm playing an early build of the game, and I won't really know that until I actually get my hands on an updated version. Another small change I noticed is the Scorpion box is now a much more accurate model to what you see in the Esper picture. Before it just looked like a little basket or something. It kind of looked out of place. And another thing I noticed is the bomb scene in the game has been greatly improved. When you try and run away from a bomb that's about to explode, the game just sort of takes over and does the running for you. And it's hard to describe how awkward this part is in the original game, but I genuinely died about 10 times when I went back and played this a couple of months ago. And I do really greatly appreciate they've streamlined this part, because I could see if you got to this far and you just walked into this random sort of shop front and you weren't prepared to run away from a bomb, you might have to go very far back to find an earlier save, because yeah, it's pretty much instant death if you get caught up in this bomb. But these are mostly small changes, and I know a lot of people will probably complain that not enough has been changed or upgraded. If this was being sold as a remake or a remaster, then yeah, I would agree that not enough has changed. But this isn't being sold as that, it's an enhanced edition. If this was a remake, it would be just that, a completely new game. And to remake Blade Runner, I worry that you might lose the charm of the original game. And above all else, the enhanced version doesn't do that. As with every game Nightdive touched, there's a respect for the original version. The original experience is there for a new audience on modern hardware, including all the consoles. I never expected to see Blade Runner on a console in my life. It's worth pointing out that Nightdive are actually remaking a game, and it's called System Shock, but that remake has been worked on since 2016, so it's a very long process, and one that I don't think Nightdive really want to get back into anytime soon. Certainly not until System Shock has been released and they're happy with how it's playing. And the chances of them remaking Blade Runner are fairly slim. They're much more likely just to remake System Shock 2 after they do System Shock 1. If they do any remakes at all after this, I'm sure it was a very painful process for them. With that being said, I would love to actually see a Blade Runner remake in the style of the System Shock 1 remake, just all pre-rendered static backgrounds. I think that would look really cool. Hopefully someday this game will get a full remaster, but there's probably not much that can be done until the original uncompressed footage is ever found, which by the sounds of things it might never be found. So for now, I want to thank Nightdive for breathing life into this old game and preserving it for future generations. If you've never played this game and you want to check it out, or you played it before and you want to try it again on modern hardware, currently this is the best way to do so. Thanks for watching, and check out my channel where I'll do a full playthrough of the Enhanced Edition.